Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
John Tucker sitting in for Alex Steele. I'm Paul Sweeney. We're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. What we've been trying to do all day today, starting at 7 a.m. with Tom Keenan Surveillance, is just to try to find some guests here who are experienced in, educated in, all things in the complexities of the Middle East and help us, the audience, to get some context about what's happening in the Middle East. Our next guest is certainly one of those folks. Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, joining us from Washington, D.C. via Zoom here. Aaron, we've had Presidents Biden, Presidents Trump urging Israel to have restraint, particularly as it relates to Iran. But I guess today Iran said, hey, the risks to us are just too high. Iran is making too much progress on the nuclear front. We had to act. What kind of context, or how do you view what happened last night?
It's a long movie, guys, and thanks for having me. First of all, I think the Israelis acted in large part because you have an Israeli prime minister who is now very risk-ready. His lifelong mission is to free Israel from the shadow of an Iranian bomb. And the Israelis, not just the prime minister, get behind this idea of the Begin doctrine. You know that in the summer of 1981, then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin went after the Assyrian reactor in Iraq and destroyed it. The Americans destroyed the reactor again, by the way, during their campaigns in Iraq. This is during the Reagan administration, and Reagan was not very happy with the Israeli decision. He later came to regret it, though, and agreed with Begin that getting rid of the reactor was a wise move. In this case, I think the first Democratic and Republican president ever did not communicate in a unmistakable way to the Prime Minister of Israel. And they talked on Thursday. We're not sure what the conversation was before these strikes last night and this morning. They, let's put it this way, Donald Trump did not say no. Had he wanted to say no, he could have brought to bear an enormous amount of leverage and pressure to dissuade the Israelis from not striking. So I don't think that conversation was necessary. He may have had doubts, but I think in the end, he simply enabled, exceeded, and acquiesced in the prime minister's decision. And remember, the negotiations were supposed to resume on Sunday in Oman, and yet the administration kept saying right up to the end, 5 hours before the strikes, the president tweeted on Truth Social that he hoped there would be a diplomatic ending to this. So the administration cooperated with this ruse. And right now we're waiting for the Iranian response. It could be weeks before it occurs. They're clearly knocked off balance. Much of their general staff has been eliminated. Former head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard eliminated. Chief of staff of the Iranian military eliminated. The Israelis are still ongoing now, striking ballistic missile sites, UAV sites, drone sites, in effort to repress and suppress whatever remains of Iran's air defense. There will be an Iranian response. It may be asymmetrical, using terror against Israeli or Jewish targets. There's a history there. It could be a while, and then you raise the question, or I'd raise it, what are the Iranians going to respond to? Will they confine their strikes to to Israel proper? Or are they going to go after American assets in the Gulf or in Iraq or in Syria or oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia? I would bet, given how weak and vulnerable the Iranians are, they'd probably, at least at this stage, confine their response to Israel.
Secretary Rubio said this was a unilateral action. Then we got a tweet or something on social media from the president that said, among other things, the next attack being planned will be, quote, even more brutal. It begs the question for me, what is U.S. foreign policy with respect to this?
Well, I think the president had made a judgment. He obviously argued the Iranian negotiations were not producing. He gave them 2 months to reach an agreement, which was an unrealistic deadline, to be sure. That deadline was reached June 11, and that Thursday overnight, Thursday, Friday morning, they attacked. So no, I think the administration rode the tiger of what the Israelis now have in this region, which is an escalation dominance. They've essentially hollowed out Hamas as a military organization. They've basically decimated Hezbollah. Hezbollah issued a statement saying, remarkably, they would not initiate any activity in response to what the Israelis have done. So I think that right now, the NSC, President's chairing an NSC meeting. I'd say the priorities, you asked me what U.S. foreign policy will be. In this case, I think there are 3 or 4 issues. Number one, protect Americans. Make sure that the sites that are vulnerable are as hardened as they could be. Number 2, prepare for a significant defense, assistance of Israel, help the Israelis multi-layer their own defenses, as the Biden administration did, in response to the Iranian attacks last year in April and October. That's number 2. Number 3, coordinate regional defense. Unnamed Gulf countries in April and October helped, both intelligence-wise and participation in an air and missile defense shield, remarkably supporting Israel in the face of that Iranian attack. Jordan shot down drones in last April and October, and the U.S. deployed F-15 specially equipped with interceptors to protect and help the Jordanians' airspace. The final piece of what policy would be, are they looking for a way to de-escalate? Will they try and push, I doubt for something in the Security Council, but some sort of initiative that would try to get the Iranians back to the negotiating table? That's going to be a very heavy lift, though, guys. I mean, the Iranians invested $5 trillion over time in this nuclear program. They are humiliated. They are embarrassed to the extreme. So I think we're talking about we're the beginning of a very long and very difficult Israeli-Iranian confrontation.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. Aaron David Miller, he's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C., joining us via Zoom.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Let's get back to the geopolitical topic of the day, Israel and Iran. Ariel Cohen joins us, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us from Stockholm, Sweden via Zoom. Ariel, can you put into context what has happened over the last 24 hours? What is Israel's strategy?
Of course.
Where does Iran go from here?
First of all, this was in the works for probably 20 years. Iran was giving every opportunity to walk away from its nuclear weapons program. First with the JCPOA planned by the Obama administration. It didn't work. Instead of, yes, they could enrich for the domestic power production, 3.5% enriched uranium. They escalated 20% and more. Now they were enriching at 60 to 80%, which the only application is weapons. They kept accelerating development of their ballistic missiles, and they were funding proxies from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, from the Houthis to Hezbollah, to Iraqi Kataib Hezbollah. So they were building or trying to build a Middle Eastern empire, and it all came down crushing. And Trump gave him 60 days to agree to keep their internal domestic power production through nuclear reactors, but to shut down the enrichment. They refused. Every Friday, they chanted death to America, death to Israel. They tried to assassinate Trump on American soil. So when people are telling me now, we don't care about Iran, nobody talks about Iran, like this Bright Lights Marjorie Taylor Greene said in
I just want to quickly
Congress.
ask you, do we know if the Iranian nuclear capabilities have been neutralized or anywhere near neutralized at this point?
I think Israel is way on its way to do that. because the Natanz enrichment facility, despite the fact that it was protected with an 8-meter concrete envelope, is destroyed, and other nuclear facilities are destroyed. But if this regime stays in place, they may rebuild, or it will require another war in 5 or 10 years. So the question I'm asking myself, number one, with Trump watching the inflation, can the Saudis and other Gulf oil producing countries export oil west to the Red Sea, so that the oil supply is not disrupted too much? This is important for the U.S., that Iran doesn't put mines in the Strait of Hormuz, through which 25 to 30% of oil exports is going through. And secondly, can the regime survive either giving up its nuclear program or being bombed as badly as the Israelis seem to be doing, and still stay in power? And at this point, I'm not sure about either outcome.
Dr. Cohen, can you just reiterate what I think I heard you say, which is you believe that Israel has destroyed or neutralized their nuclear facilities?
Indeed. The main enrichment facility was in Natanz. Israel is also destroying or destroyed most of the massive ballistic missile arsenals. Just the other day, we saw that Iran was buying enough materials and precursors to build 10,000 ballistic missiles over a period of 3 years from China. Apparently, this is also a target. It may not be fully destroyed yet because we're barely 24 hours into the operation. But in terms of the success of taking out the leadership of the Iranian Air Force, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders, what will happen in the next couple of weeks?
We're going to have to leave it there just because of time. We really appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. Dr. Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us via Zoom from Stockholm.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us live on YouTube.
Inflation expectations coming down. So let's check in with Joanne Hsu, Surveys of Consumers Director at the University of Michigan. Joanne, big snapback in the numbers, a big reversal, it seems like.
Yes, consumers are feeling a little bit more settled after the big shock of the April developments in tariffs. So they do think that the outlook for the economy has improved. At the same time, we're still, almost 20% below where we were back in December after sentiment saw a post-election bump. So consumers are still pretty far from where they were just a few months ago, and they don't think we're out of the woods yet.
And Joanne, with respect to all the great work that you guys do with the events of the past 24 hours, particularly with the inflation expectations, I kind of tend to want to throw these numbers right out the window.
Well, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and in terms of how consumers react to global events in the Middle East, where we can wait until the final reading for June. But of course, things are happening on a daily basis. Consumers are incorporating this information, separate from the possible disruption to energy prices from what's going on. Overall, consumers' worst fears about what might happen to inflation when they saw the developments in April. They feel better about that, but they're still bracing for higher inflation than they were just a few months ago. So consumers are bracing for that.
And the one-year inflation expectation was 6.4%. It's down. It came in at 5.1, still much higher than where we want to see it, where the Fed wants to see it. Joanne, thanks so much for joining us. Joanne Hsu, Surveys of Consumers Director at the University of Michigan.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us live on YouTube.
Let's check in with the story from yesterday, the air crash in India that claimed so many lives. A lot of issues there. One of the issues is just Boeing, the plane, GE, the engines. From a business perspective, that's kind of where a lot of folks are looking at this state. Sid Phillip joins us, Deputy Team Leader for Global Aviation, Zoom from Paris. Sid, what do we know about the actual plane itself? Maybe some causes here. Has anything been reported?
So far, there hasn't been much in terms of causes. I mean, so far we understand that investigators are combing through the wreckage to determine really what caused that crash, and it killed all but one person on board, so 241 people.
The fact that somebody walked away from that is absolutely a miracle.
I can't wait to see the reporting on that. So
it is.
Has Boeing said anything? What's Boeing said since?
Boeing's actually it hasn't said a lot. Boeing is basically deferring to the regulators and investigators on this matter. So they're sort of putting it onto investigators, saying they're not going to comment and they're not going to say anything about this accident. They're going to help with the investigation, but they aren't going to comment, and they're going to let the investigators sort of work through whatever evidence that they can find and whatever sort of the black boxes and what they decode from those black boxes before they really make a determination and say anything on the matter.
This also gets to the investigation, but you know more than us about that particular airport in question. I understand that's known for a lot of bird strikes. Do I have that right?
There have been some bird strikes. I mean, again, at this point, it's a bit early to be saying what the matter is. I mean, at the moment, the accident's being investigated by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau of India, and they also have investigators from the UK and the US who are assisting with the probe. And so they're looking at multiple angles in this investigation. And I think the DGCA, which is India's aviation regulator, also ordered some maintenance checks on all of Air India's Boeing 787s, including they're asking them to check on fuel systems, cabin air, engine control, hydraulics, just to rule out what really caused this incident.
Hey, so just thinking about Boeing, it seemed like just recently, maybe the last 6 to 9 months, Boeing was putting behind it a lot of the safety issues that have plagued it for the last several years, the 737 MAX and so on, and then this happened. What's the feeling within Boeing about kind of where they are in terms of getting back some of their engineering chops, their safety chops, getting production levels back up to where they need to be? What do you think the view is from Boeing?
So Boeing obviously has been working on improving their quality systems. They have a new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, who is sitting there, who has basically been working on improving quality and making sure that the company can actually ramp up production and ramp up safely. And so that's what they've been ramping up. And they've sort of just reached a key milestone on the 737 MAX, which is separate from the jet that actually crashed in India. And that jet is the one that had those 2 fatal crashes in 2018 and 19, and also the door plug falling off last year. And so they've ramped up production on that. They've sort of got to the FAA mandated level of 38 a month. And so they are in the process of sort of shoring up their company, shoring up their balance sheet. And this will be a sort of blow to that effort. And this will sort of force Kelly Ortberg, the new CEO, to sort of, again, go back into crisis mode. And I mean, he isn't going to be attending the Paris Air Show, which starts next week. He's decided to skip that along with Stephanie Pope, who leads the commercial unit.
Yeah, I was kind of curious how that proceeds. Arguably, the Paris Air Show is what? That's the biggest event on the aviation calendar, isn't it?
It is the biggest aviation event, typically where airlines splash out on big orders. There's lots. It's very celebratory. That's where airlines sort of talk about their future fleet plans, and aircraft manufacturers, including Airbus and Boeing, show off what their latest products are and all the innovations and developments that they have.
So where is Boeing in terms of, like, a lot of folks tell me, hey, if you're looking at Boeing, the only thing you'd really need to focus on is how many 737s are they getting off the line every month? Where are we right now, and where do they want to go?
At the moment, we're close to the FAA mandated limit of about 38 a month, and they have talked about getting beyond that to about 50 a month, but that is long term. It's not yet not a near-term consideration, but that's basically where Airbus, which is Boeing's direct rival, makes about 60 A321s, which compete with the 737 MAX. They make about 60 a month, and they have an ambition of reaching 75 a month by 2027.
Tell us about GE, the engines in question, and does Boeing, is GE just one of the many suppliers of engines for Boeing?
No, so GE is one of the main suppliers of engines for Boeing. I mean, on the 737 MAX, GE is one half of a joint venture that makes the exclusive engines for the 737 MAX, and they also provide all the engines on the 777X, which is the upcoming model, and they're one of two engine options on the 787. So they're a very, very important supplier in terms of the aviation ecosystem. They're a very important supplier to Boeing, and I mean, this engine has is been in service for over a decade now, and so this isn't a new engine. It isn't an engine that has any particular issues. So it is. I mean, I'm sure that GE is also contributing to the investigation.
All right. Sid, thanks so much for joining us. Sid Phillip, Bloomberg Deputy Team Leader for Global Aviation.
This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.